Say about multisensory learning styles.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about what that is, why we teach to those, and how we figure out what learning style is best for each child.
All right.
Okay? So Howard Gardner is a famous Harvard psychologist who believes that if you use multisensory techniques, it ignites the brain for better learning.
Okay, go ahead.
Are we good? Good. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the different multisensory learning styles. So the first one is auditory learning. And so that, as the name suggests, is listening by learning. And a lot of our students actually say that that is their least favorite way of learning or the least effective way to learn, which is interesting because that's actually one of the ones that we use the most. And so that can look like the teacher will be at the front of the room and the students will be listening at their seats. And researchers actually say that students can only listen for as long as their age. So for example, we teach 8-year-olds, and so they say that they can only sit and listen for about 8 minutes before they start getting distracted. So that's important to keep in mind when we're talking about auditory learning. Does that sound good? Good, okay. The next learning style is visual learning. So that's learning by watching or by seeing. And so this can involve using things like maps or pictures or diagrams. It can also be writing on the board. So if you write the directions first on the board or having a copy of the directions in front of you, that's visual learning. It can also be watching someone do something or model something before you do it as an example. So those are examples of visual learning. The last one, oh, good? The last style is kinesthetic learning. And so that's learning by doing or learning by moving your body. And a lot of our students have said that that is the most effective way for them to learn. And so this can include singing, movement breaks, tapping out words when they're spelling them, or using manipulatives or objects. So especially in math, using things like blocks or students to represent numbers. Those are examples of kinesthetic learning. And so most learners need a combination of these three things. So they need a combination of visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic learning to help them learn best. And the reason that we teach with these three ways is that it stimulates the brain. And so it leaves less time for students to be distracted and thinking about other things because they're so focused on the learning. Okay.
The way we begin with this unit in September when we come back to school and we're getting to know our learners is that we have the kids brainstorm, how do you think you learn? And that's where we came up with this list that we sent to you. So our second graders came up with these ideas. So they said by thinking, by problem solving, not in a very loud room, in a very quiet room, when I focus, when I'm not rushing, when I am inspired by other people, by feeling things, so again, kinesthetic, by hearing, by listening, trusting the people I'm learning from, by smelling, by watching, by collaborating, by doing, and by correcting my errors. So this information was interesting to us, that they really had an understanding of what it means to learn or how they learn. So we started with that, and then we moved to 3 stations. We set up 3 different stations: a kinesthetic station, a visual station, and an auditory station. So at the visual station, the children were reading a book. So they had a book. We decided the subject would be trees. So they all in a group read a book about trees, and that was their visual. Their kinesthetic activity was to draw a tree. So they stood at a window. We enclosed pictures. They stood at a window here and looked out at a tree and drew pictures of the tree. And the last station, they were listening to a book. So a teacher could read a book about trees. Our kids were listening on an iPad. This was the picture of the iPad, and they were listening to a little tape about trees. Here was where they were reading books. After they did that, we had them fill out a sheet. So reflect on which way they thought they learned the most about trees. Okay. Got one thumbs up. Do we have more? What?
I think
it froze.
But I think.
So are we okay? Do you have questions?
We are okay. We are okay.
You're okay? Okay. So from there, we enclosed 3 sheets for you about how we learn best. So this is the one the younger children could use about how they learn best. And they could just circle. Do they learn best by hearing? Do they learn best by doing, kinesthetic? Or do they learn best by reading or looking? So that would be for the younger children. For kids maybe in grades 2 through 5, they could write about how they learn best. So do they learn by visual, by reading? And we had them write down what they learned. So when they were reading the books, what did they learn? When they were listening, what did they learn? And then when they were drawing, what did they learn? We had them draw the tree here. And then we had them tell us which style they preferred or which one they felt helped them learn about trees. We okay? And our last sheet is for your older children, so grades standard 6 through 8, where they really can write down about how they learned best using their auditory, their listening, their visual by looking, or their kinesthetic by doing, and why. So they really need to think about which one helped them learn the best. So as we said, though, typically it's a combination of these styles. So that's something you want to reflect with. Many times the kids will say they want auditory directions and either kinesthetic or visual. At Derby, we actually try to do all 3. So we will give the directions, we will write them on the board, and often we will have them get up and do an activity with movement. For example, if we're spelling a word, say the word is said. I would say the word said. I would put it in a sentence. I would have the children give me a sentence. I would have the word on the board. And then they would stand up and tap it out. S-A-I-D, said. So that they would learn how to internalize the word. They also could write it on their desk with their fingers. S, A, I, D. And they could underline it. So as many ways that you can use to touch on different learning styles is really helpful to ignite the brain. So this is all research-based. Anything else? I don't think so.
Let's get them to ask questions.
Do you have any questions?
There's a lot of information.
I think there are some questions now.
Okay.
And Nelson has a question. Okay, I want to take you back where you're talking about the listening span for those. Which age group was that?
I didn't hear you, Hanak.
For those who a listening span of
Listen. Yeah.
guys.
So I think you're talking about when I had said that students who are 8 years old could listen for about 8 minutes. Is that what you're talking about?
But listening for 8 minutes or so. Is that what you
Go back and explain.
Yeah, so what that means is that depending on how old your students are, so let's say we're talking about 5-year-olds, right? Researchers have said that they would only be able to sit and listen to a teacher talking and be able to pay attention and focus for about 5 minutes. So depending on how old your students are, that's how long that they could listen. So older students are going to be able to sit and listen for a longer period of time than younger students.
Excellent.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point. So if you're working with 12-year-olds, really you do not want to be in front of the classroom talking for more than 12 minutes because they will lose attention. So you can talk for 10 minutes, but then you need to do an activity and get moving. I think that's really important.
Good. Are there any other questions?
It's Nelson.
It's Nelson.
Hi, Nelson.
The use of multisensory how are we going to do it when we have who have some disabilities?
Disabilities?
Oh, kids with disabilities.
Who will not suit them? How do we assist them?
Ask if it's about disabilities.
Down with maybe physical.
Oh, physical disabilities?
Oh, physical disabilities?
Like moving?
Yeah. So we want to understand using the multiple sensory learning.
So I think he's asking if you have
Together,
physical disabilities.
assist the learners
in the multisensory learning. How do you help them? Yeah.
only who has that disability.
So, meaning they can't get up to move?
Yeah, of course, yes.
So in a wheelchair or like just hard.
Yeah.
So maybe you could have that child even close to the chalkboard. So they're getting bigger movement on the chalkboard with their arm. It's really muscle memory helps. So rather than writing small on a paper, they can write it in a larger way. They can sing it. They can say it. So using many different ways, clapping, tapping, those are all movement.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have someone with physical disabilities?
No.
Good, great question.
Yeah.
Okay.
About the time we need to spend.
Time.
To me, I'm thinking like immediately you're introducing a new topic, that to give them an activity so that the learners can. So that in the time, by the time I'm giving them then they are.
Sounds like he's talking about introducing
new topic. Then how can that go?
So you're breaking up a little bit. So if you're introducing a topic that takes more than 10 minutes, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Do you need to I would take a brain break. Oh, yeah. Or I was going to say split it up in 2 days.
Yeah. So one thought would be, if it's a day where there's a lot of information and you're introducing a new topic, you can always split it up into 2 different days. So you can maybe introduce the topic and talk for 10 minutes at the beginning and do your activity, and then extend on it the next day and continue talking at the beginning of that class and do a different activity. So you can break it up so that you're not always just talking at the front of the room.
Another thing that we do in 2nd grade is we may talk for a few minutes and notice that the kids are starting to wiggle or get distracted or not pay attention. So we'll have them stand up and we'll just do a shakedown. We even just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And they're moving their arms and then each leg. And then we'll go 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just get their bodies moving. Or we can have them walk around the room on their tiptoes in 2 big circles. Or do some push-ups. Or do some jumping jacks just to get them moving. And then they can sit back down and pay attention.
It's like the responsive classrooms that they practiced.
Nelson, we did a little bit of that when I was there, and we did the responsive classroom and really had the kids moving.
Yeah, these guys did this. Yeah.
And Annie,
Yeah.
and Annie did that also.
And there's a book of those exercises there with Hannah.
So Karen said there's a book of activities that Hannah has with different activities for movement breaks.
I think Cynthia brought it.
We think Cynthia brought it.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga. We'll stop class and we'll do some breathing techniques, or we'll do just a few yoga moves just to get them refocused. Do you have more questions?
Yeah, there is another question from over here.
Good.
And the question is, do they know who their opponents are? Do they know that, or do they try?
Ready. It's applicable to the lower classes, except we are against time. So we make sure that we cover a lot so that our children should be able to study for national examinations.
The exams.
Yeah, they're up against time.
Do that with
And it pays off.
So are you saying that you're on a tight schedule with the national exams? Yes. We understand that. We also feel like you will accomplish more if you can let the kids take these breaks. Because if you're just what we call chalk and talk. So if you are at the front of the room and talking for 40 minutes and not letting the kids get up and move and teaching in multi-learning styles, they're not going to get as much out of your lesson. If you can get them up and moving and using the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, they're going to absorb more information. We think it will pay off. And Howard Gardner, who's done a lot of research, tells us that this pays off.
Good. Another comment?
We are interested. Do you feel like you know your learners, that you do have some auditory, some visual, and some kinesthetic learners in your classes? Sort of.
We are saying to say, repeat. This way.
Do you need me to ask the question? No, you're not sure.
So they could fake try.
So if you try and one of the activity that we gave you, the kids will be able to tell you how they think they learn. And that will give you good information.
Okay, so I think she was asking, let me just explain. Have we identified, like, have we tried to categorize our,
Do they know how to do that? It's the homework.
are we able to know that this guidance is better? That's our maybe vision. That is the question. Okay, so most of the teachers are saying they've not qualified children in their classes according to their learning style. We may need to look at.
Could you say that one more time?
I'm saying I was just trying to ask them if they have at this point different learning styles in their classes. So the teachers are saying more especially in standard 8 upper classes.
More what?
More what?
For sure. Okay,
Just the end. Missing it.
We didn't get the end of your sentence.
okay, I'm saying identified children according to their learning styles.
Can you try again? Hanak, I can't see you. It might help if I can see you.
Yeah.
Okay. The teachers are saying they have not
Need the visual.
identified learning styles of their children.
Yeah.
Teach, but not knowing who is good at this or who learns better at that.
That's the homework. So Madeline is going to tell you how to figure that out. And then next time we'll tell you what to do with that information.
So for your homework for this session, what we would like you to do is to try to do that 3-station activity that we talked about with your students. So Betsy, being at your school before, has said, for example, you could do this activity with gardens. So it just has to be a topic that you have books about and that students could go and observe. So for example, one station would be students reading about gardens. The second station could be students drawing gardens. And the third one would be students listening to a book about gardens. And just as a warning, some of these stations will be independent. So you as the teacher will not be able to be at each of these stations, so that's something to keep in mind. So as a teacher, you will only be able to be at one station and the other two will have to be independent. Or you could also utilize that second teacher in your classroom. I know that some of you have that other teacher, so this would be a good opportunity to have them run a station. And so the students will rotate through each of the stations in your classroom, and then they will fill out one of the sheets that we have shown that you have, depending on what grade you're at. And then as the teacher, you can collect this information and see what you notice about how your class learns. And ask the kids some questions about what they noticed about their learning style. That make sense?
Do they think it's try?
Do you think that that's something that you could do with your class?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas of a topic that you could use for this activity?
Something you need books about, something you could look at.
It could be within your curriculum. I mean, it could be something.
Could be something within your curriculum. Can you tell us if you have some ideas? I was guessing gardens because you've got the beautiful garden, and I was hoping you might have a book about flowers and gardens.
It's part of agriculture's part.
Yeah, maybe also you can leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Leaves, yeah. So students could observe the leaves and they could read about leaves and listen to a story about leaves. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or ideas about a topic?
Sarah's right. Do you have any ideas?
Mathematics. Shapes of different objects.
Shapes, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are all great ideas. So once you've done that and you've talked to your students about how they learn best, and you've taken a look at the information that you've collected, for our next session, we're going to help you figure out what you can do with that information to help plan your instruction and plan your lessons. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you have any other questions? That's really the information we had.
Also tell them about the ability groups. If you have questions about the ability
Any
groups, send them to
questions? Any comments?
the abilities group. If they have questions about that, to email. Yeah, and I can email. And we can always circle back to that.
So I think it's good to know also if you ever have any questions, Karen was just saying about the ability grouping or about how to do this. If you have questions, you can email Karen and we will get back to you. You know, sometimes it's hard when there's 4 weeks in between our calls and you might have questions.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll try if
Yeah.
Do you have any questions before we go?
They will send us questions. Yeah.
yeah.
just to ask, everyone was asked or talking about, but mine is about the age and the times.
Okay. That's a.
There's like that you know these.
Someone is 7 years old. His
That should be a brain break, yeah.
Is that so?
Are you asking about the age of the child and how long they can listen? Okay, that seems to be a tricky one. And we still make mistakes. It's a hard thing to think about. But again, to be in front of the room and just talking and talking and talking is really hard for children to just pay attention. So it doesn't, as another teacher was saying, you can just give them a break. You can just let them get up and move, give them a certain, activity. Like I said, walk around the room on your tippy toes, do 10 jumping jacks. Some way to just break up the teaching a little bit. So that's one way.
Get right back into it.
And then go back into your teaching again. That can be a 2-minute break.
Yeah, it's not a recess.
Yeah, it's not a long recess. It's not a huge break. But it just lets the kids have a moment to just move. That's almost what?
The extension of
Can you?
Adult, does it apply to adults? Like if somebody is in 40 minutes or so, the adults.
14. So if they're 14, they can sit for about 14 minutes.
No, I mean if somebody is 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah. Doesn't that seem like a long time though? If you're 40, even to sit for 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, so that's what Nelson was trying to ask.
Yes. Yeah, so imagine if you're an 8-year-old and you're asked to sit there for 40 minutes. It's too long.
Sure.
We know that that's too long for us.
Yeah, that sounds great.
There's a lot.
Even you sitting here to listen to us, right? It's long.
Yeah, you should have them get up and
Thumbs up. It should have you move. I should have modeled that. So any other questions before we go?
We have like 3 minutes.
We have about 3 minutes, Karen says.
Just a comment.
Yep.
Yes. I think this is good that we need to change or to vary our methods of teaching to make the child alive. Because some of the children definitely, when we take long, they sleep in our lesson. So if you teach for 10 minutes and you change for another 5 minutes and change, you make the lesson more alive.
Yeah.
That's a reminder to us. It's just a comment.
It is. It's a challenge for us too. It is. I have to remind myself all the time, they've been sitting for too long. I need to get them moving.
Yeah.
So it's a switch in thinking.
Yeah.
I hope you'll try it.
Yeah, I was about to say that I also like the combination of the 3 learnings at the same time. For example, the kinesthetic learning in your lesson. I feel like that is very important. For example, you were talking about explaining the word said. So when you ask the children even to tap the word said, I think they will remember. So I feel like, using the three the three styles at the same time will really have an impact than just maybe using one or two styles of learning in your lesson. So I feel like this is good.
You just wrapped it up for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, you guys are awesome. You're all such good presenters.
It's hard to know what pace to go when you're talking.
Right.
They can hear it.
You got it though.